All right, so let's talk about the final project. Who would like to go first?
I can go first.
Okay, Ron.
Okay, so I posted my discussion
Hmm?
a few days ago, and mine is teen pregnancy,
Okay.
and I'm testing if it has decreased over the years, like if the proportion has decreased over the years. And
Okay.
on your comments, you said that I could do a linear regression analysis over time and see if the rate is changing. And I'm not
Yeah.
really sure how to go about doing that.
So what this is a perfect example. So like if we look at teenage pregnancy, you have what we'd call census data. Like they've counted the whole population or they've inferred to the population already. So you don't really have any sample data to compare against the population, which is really what we want to do is find a sample of, with means or proportions or two means or two proportions, something like that, to compare either two groups to each other or a group to a population. That's what we're looking for. So if you've got some good what are called population data, or they call them population parameters, something that describes a population. You've got that with the teenage pregnancy rates or whatever it is, right? Um, since you don't really have a sample, right? Now you if you could find a smaller study, let's say teenage pregnancy rates in Polk County, right? And there's and this is like in the under 1,000 or 2,000 sample size, and you find a study about that, and you can compare that to like make maybe the Iowa proportion or the national one. That is one option. If you can find a smaller study to compare, is that helpful?
Yes. So can I keep the source that I used and then do I just compare that to like Iowa teen pregnancy and that proportion?
So Iowa might be a little large, right? And if you look like how many teenagers are there in Iowa? A whole bunch, right?
A lot.
Okay, a lot. Especially how many teenage girls are there? Still a whole bunch, right? But even Polk County, how many teenage girls are there in Polk County? Still thousands, right? Many thousands. So it's still hard because you're going to be given. But if they went out and surveyed like something, right? And they say in this survey we asked 1,000 teenage, right? And they go through this. You can use that
Mhm.
data because you already have the population stuff to compare against. So I'm just gonna make up a hypothetical. Let's say it's I don't know 1.3% or whatever it is, and the national one is 1.7%. I don't even know, but you could say, okay, my null hypothesis is that the proportion equals the population, what it should be, the larger group. How does this sample compare to that? That is definitely something you could do. So I don't remember that link and how many were in that sample. My guess is it was trying to infer to larger groups or give state level data, maybe even.
I
I can't remember.
think I'm gonna pull it up. Um, so it was just the US teen birth rates per 1,000 females.
Yeah. So that is the count per 1,000. That means we are we are inferring this to the entire United States population, which is many, many millions. Okay, great. You've got some good population data. You can pretty sure that the real proportion is somewhere around there. The question is now, can you find a study or a smaller sample of a certain demographic or age group or whatever location, school, whatever it is that you could compare against that? That is definitely one option.
Mhm.
The other option that I
Okay.
suggested is if you've just got population stuff, and you're like, well, in the year 1990 it was this, in the year 90, if you've got this longitudinal data, like here's the proportion over the many, many years for the United States, well, then you can look for trends, and you can do a linear regression analysis, do a scatter plot, plot them out,
Mhm.
find the slope of the line, and then you can do a t-test for the slope. And so that's something that we essentially, that's what we did in chapter 10. And so
Okay.
some people are like, well, I can't really find any sample data to compare against this population, so I'll just do that. And it's fine because StatCrunch will even do a confidence interval for the slope. It'll do a t-test for the slope with a p-value. A little different with that because you haven't really done hypothesis testing with that, is just a little additional learning. Like everybody's like, well, what's my null hypothesis if I do that? Well, your null hypothesis is there's no correlation. There is no change over time, or there's no association. So that would be a slope of 0. Your null
Well,
hypothesis is
isn't it independent and like dependent for those?
exactly. So you're saying this independent variable and this dependent variable, there's no effect, right? And so if that was the case, there wouldn't be any change. So your null hypothesis is m, or slope, equals 0. Your alternative is that it's not. And then you did that regression, right? And you had a R value and a T score and a P value. Do we see an association? Has it increased? Has it decreased? Has it stayed the same? And so that's really what your analysis becomes.
Okay.
Another option is if you are able to find sample data. Let's say you're able to find sample data from like 2022, and you also find sample data from 2002. Then you could compare 2 samples to each other, but these have to be samples, not populations. But sometimes that's good. Like in this school, it was this in this year, and now it's this. Let's do a difference of proportions. That's a third option. So you can kind of see how it really depends on what kind of data are you finding. Are you able to find sample data? What type of data is it? And then what question am I going to answer with all that? Which is what makes this project so good, is because you're taking what you learned in chapters 7, essentially 7 through 10, and applying it to a real situation, or trying to. It's a little contrived, a little bit, not purely, it's an introductory course. So we're trying to give you the ability to, think statistically like this, make some inferences, explain the results. And then there's a template on the project that kind of shows you, do this, make sure you do these steps. That will help walk you through what you need, and screenshots. And the cool thing is, if you submit this before May 4th, I think it is, that Tuesday, I'll give you feedback. And if you want to fix something, or if you want to take your score, that's great. And you can resubmit an adjusted project.
Okay.
Cool.
Is there like one method that you think would fit the parameters of the final project the best, or do you just think I could go any direction with this?
Any of those I described. I mean, you could, especially if you're talking about proportions, you could do 1 sample proportion, 2 sample proportions, linear regression. All those things would be appropriate. Same thing with means. If you did something with means, 1 mean, 2 means, regression, those are all valid and good. And so as you look at everybody's discussion boards, you can start now. You can look through them and go, oh, okay, I get it. That's this sample compared to this population. Or no, they're comparing these 2 samples to each other. I've had several people take some team statistics from conferences and stuff, right? Well, the problem is they're saying, well, this school averaged this, and this school averaged this, and this school averaged this. I'm like, you can't take the average of averages. You have to know how many samples there were to come up with that, or the raw data is even better. So I've kind of helped kind of push some people to think more about like that. It's like you're like, well, these teams averaged this percentage shooting from the field. You're like, okay, that's their whole season. But what would be better is how many shots did they take and how many did they make for the season, plus this team, plus this team, plus this, right? So you get that proportion against this side of the conference or whatever. So try and get down to the root data, not just a summarization of the data. Sometimes it works, it's fine. But especially if you're talking about means, you need to know the standard deviation. That's the other thing about means. So.
Okay. I'm thinking that
I kind of said that for everything, for all the people that may or may not watch this.
I'm thinking the direction I want to go in is to do what we were doing in chapter 10, which was like the slope and the scatter plot, and to do a t-test for the, like best fit. Yep. And so
the least squares regression line. Yeah.
Would I do, okay, so my X value would be the years, the proportion years that I'm comparing, and then my Y value would just be the proportion of teen pregnancies that I got, that is the per 1,000 number
Yep.
that I got.
That'll be just fine. In
Okay.
fact, let's say it's 2 per 1,000, right? Or whatever it ends up being. Then go ahead and just put 2
Okay.
and point, and so it'll scale appropriately. And yeah,
So
that's great.
if I do like a 10-year span or like a 15-year span or whatever, should I do every portion of each of those years so that I can do a full scatter plot and find them? Okay.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
And more is better there. Yeah. More data or more years is better. Some
Okay.
people will do things like they've done this with like concentration of carbon right in the atmosphere, and they'll go back 100 years, and they'll do it every 10 years, kind of thing. And so
Mhm.
but that's again that's census data. So we like to encourage students to do analysis of sample data, but there is this alternative as well that's just as valid. So
Okay.
all right, how's that? That was Rowan. That is spot on. This is a conversation I literally will have 50 times. Um, well, yeah, maybe. So sometimes my wife wonders. I go, "Hey, it's final project time." She's like, "Oh, I get it. Okay." Like this is the time we need. This is when so if I'm teaching this face to face, we have these conversations and we have everybody in the class say like what you're saying, and the class
Mhm.
gives feedback on it, which is what that discussion board is supposed to kind of simulate. So you can pick up some good stuff, but this interaction is harder. So that's why this a phone call or this is superior to figure this
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
All right, Kelsey, did you learn anything from that, or is that what's your project about?
Yeah, so I was kind of struggling with like an idea and then if it was acceptable. So I haven't even like posted anything yet. So I came to
That's
this
totally
meeting
fine.
just, yeah, just to like listen and get an idea. So because I read through the thing, like it needs to be a claim or a hypothesis or question that like relevant to you. So I was wanting to do, we're military, so I was wanting to do, has the amount of veteran suicide increased in the US
Mm.
in the last 3 years? But I don't know if that is like appropriate.
Yeah. Well, and so this is similar because you're going to be working with census data, right? They've counted all the suicides, right? So we know what the population uh, the number is or the proportion per 1,000 similar. We
Mm-hmm.
know that, right? So that would, if you're going to have to do that, you're going to have to make it more longitudinal. You're going to have that over many, many years and do a linear regression if you're going to do it that way. What you might want to do, like you said, over the last 3 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as you're doing some Google searching and you're looking at studies, you might want to say, in this study, in the year 2000, whatever, they found this. And it might be just an inclination towards suicide or suicidal thoughts or actual, what I mean, or attempts,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they repeated this study maybe in 2022. And you could compare those two proportions. That is,
Okay.
so if you can find, what's kind of cool is if you can find a study that was repeated in the past, because they do this, they use the same, it's called an instrument. How are they measuring this? So if they give the same instrument in the past and they keep repeating it every year, you can kind of say, well, in 2000 it was this, in 2020 it was this, and you can do a comparison of those uh, either means or proportions, whatever type of data you're looking at.
Okay.
And so if you can say, this has gotten a lot of publicity. In fact, there's a 5K this Saturday at the Boone campus. They do In My Boots 5K. And if you heard about this,
Mm-mm.
one of the counselors up there is a veteran, and so he does the push-up challenge, right? The 21 push-up challenge, because that's the average number of deaths per day of veterans from suicide, stuff like
It's
that.
22 a day, yeah.
Yeah, so now it's a 22 push-up challenge, and
Yep.
so he's the one who does this In My Boots 5K to bring awareness to this. So it's a lot more aware, right? So you might, like I just said, it went from 21 to 22. Well, what was that in, over the years?
Mm-hmm.
That's where you'd want to do a linear regression analysis to see
Okay.
how that's changed. But what you might want to do is say, find, Walter Reed Hospital did a survey of veterans, and this is the kind of information they had. You can look at what kind of data they had. You can say Walter Reed did this in this year too, and pick the same thing and do a comparison of those two. Is that
Okay.
so? I think that's a good route. So a lot of this is just getting online, searching for these things, looking for data, looking for research studies, looking for sample data that you can compare against. And if you find this really good thing, they did this study of whatever 1,000 soldiers, and they had this. Well, how does that compare with what you're finding as the national statistics? So this is a smaller subset of sample comparing to the population from which it's under.
Okay.
And so that's what your hypothesis test is really asking, is like, well, here's what we think it is. We go out and do a survey or study or whatever it is, experiment, and then we say, how does that compare to what we thought? And if it's similar, kind of reinforces it, right? We don't reject the null hypothesis. But if it's really different, it starts making us question if what we thought before is still the case. And that's when then they repeat studies and they repeat surveys. And this is how progress is made with understanding a situation, as they repeat the survey and the study, and they expand the sample size and they make it more representative, and then they can start saying, okay, here, based on all this information, here's what we think is happening in the population. That's how this is done. So if you can find a study that's kind of one of those elements, and then you can say, this is how this compares to the national stats that reporting, that the federal government's reporting, then you can say my null hypothesis is what the feds are reporting, and then I'm going to compare my sample to that.
Okay.
How's that sound?
That makes sense.
Yeah. And you can pick, and as you see, that's the cool, as you start searching, you're going to start seeing different things that are being measured. Maybe it's not just suicides. Maybe it's this, maybe it's drug use, maybe it's homelessness, maybe it's mental health issues, or maybe it's ideation about suicide, whatever. You'll see they'll have all these variables, and you can kind of go, hey, that one's more, that's interesting to me. Let me look some more that way. So
I
the cool
think
thing is that
to make it
3
more
weeks.
accurate, sorry, to make it accurate, because the mental health is a good point to do, but to make it the numbers accurate for this project, I feel like I couldn't do mental health, because a lot of my husband got out and he has combat PTSD, but a lot of his buddies do too, but only 2 out of 10 of them actually will admit it and go get help for it to even be in there. So I feel like if I did mental health or something like that, it's not even going to be accurate.
Yeah. And so how accurate is the instrument, right? And this is there's always this threat or this issue of underreporting. They're being this was the issue with child abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
See, there's no child abuse in the past. Why? Because nobody would say it.
Right.
There was no mental illness in the past. Why? Because nobody would say it. So these things we're getting a more representative, better sampling, more accurate analysis as time is going on. But then that can mislead us to think that, oh, it's getting a lot worse. It's no, it's always been this bad, probably. But now we just are aware. Our instruments are actually picking this up now. And that's a really cool thing. And actually saying that in your project would be, yes, mention that. There might be a what we'd call a underrepresentation here. There might be underrepresentation. Exactly what you say. You can even say that. I know my husband and all his buddies are in the same situation. I have a neighbor who's a Marine. He has the exact same story he's told me. Same thing. And he's had 5 friends commit suicide. And so it's a real thing. So what you need to do is see, that's a great motivation and question to analyze, right? Because it's personal. It means something to you. Now go find some research studies that do that. In fact, I bet you can find a study that would say, here's the proportion of vets that report this, but here's what we actually think the proportion is,
Okay.
and then you could say, and you could say, well, this survey came up with these results. The experts say it's underrepresented by that. You could even say in the past they would have gave that same thing and it would have been this much of underrepresentation. I don't know what you're going to exactly find. You're going to find a lot is what you're going to find. But boiling it down and finding a specific sample that you can analyze in comparison to another sample or a population is the key. So as you know,
Okay.
you got 3 weeks, really, you know, if somebody hasn't submitted something by next Tuesday, then I'm starting getting a little worried. Like, okay, and I'll give them a call and say, hey, we need to get you going on this because in a week I want you to submit your final project. So I give you in chapter 10 and 11 are not very difficult, not a lot of homework, right? So you get a lot of time to deal with this because I want you to be really good on this. This is the equivalent of an exam as far as how it's weighted in the course. So anyway, I think yes, pick something that you care about. I would rather you pick something you care about because when you leave this class, this literally might be the only thing you remember. I hope you remember more, you know, about sampling and bias and test statistics and p-values and alpha levels and type 1 and type 2 error. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff in this class, right? There's a lot to learn. But when you are talking to your family in May or June, it's Memorial Day, let's say, right? And your family's doing a ruck, and you'll be like, I did this study in statistics, and here's what I found out. You're gonna remember that, and then what this is doing is forcing you what's called Bloom's taxonomy. It's what levels of learning, like low levels, like what does that word mean? There's the definition. All the way up to application, synthesis, evaluation, creation. So what this is doing is pushing you to apply all these things we've learned to a new situation. And that, honestly, in the human brain, that's just, I don't know, that's how we actually remember things. And it clicks maybe a little more. So I'm excited to see your project. I'm excited to see what you come up with, what you find. Like, text me, email me, say, hey, I found this study. What do you think? And then we can have that, and we can do this again. No problem. So yeah, do something that you care about.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, your two examples are prime. I've had like probably, I don't know, half a dozen phone calls in the last 3 or 4 days about this, and almost everyone is going down this path, which is this is the process. You have to do this. Yeah. So yeah, I'm excited for you to see what it comes out with. And thank your husband for your service. Are you in the military as well?
No, I'm just a spouse who gets to move around and.
You are. The spouse is as much in the service as the husband sometimes, right? or the spouse, husband or wife. Yeah, I have a good friend, and he's retired now, but he did like 5 tours, and was kind of career guard, and he ran the guard unit up here in Iowa Falls, and his wife, you know, when he was have deployments, and yeah. So I don't know personally, but I know a lot of people personally that go through what you go through. So it is a sacrifice. So thank him.
Yes, I will. Yes.
All right, and you're honoring him by analyzing this. So good job.
Yeah, it's been a lot. We're back in Iowa permanently now, and I became a caregiver for veterans with disabilities. So I've been like kind of the learning curve of being the spouse and now being like the veteran spouse and understanding a different side of the military versus active duty. So it's been
That's awesome.
Fun. Yeah.
We need people like you that care for other people.
Yeah.
It's an important job.
It's a lot.
That's awesome. It is, and it's hard. I understand that. So, all right. Well, any other questions you both have about anything Again, the final is totally optional. If you don't, I mean, if you got decent test scores and you want to keep them, you don't need to take it. If you do end up taking it and it's lower than your final exam score, it's not going to hurt your grade. I'm not going to lower your grade. So I usually have a handful of people that take it that maybe had a bad exam and they want to get that bumped up. But that's and everything's due on May 6th, the very last day. So if you get anything to make up, you can go back and do your homework, missing homework for half credit, discussions for half credit. And yeah, this class is fun to teach.
Yeah, I think I'm good. I'm definitely gonna be like checking in with you as I do my calculations and as I collect my data from my source.
Sure.
But I think I'll get a good start.
Yeah, and if you, I mean, I'm probably gonna open up the final week, maybe even today or soon. I kind of don't open it up because, like, I had somebody today, hey, can you open up the final project? I want to work on it. I'm like, no, you already have the final project. It was in that discussion. You have the document. I mean, if you're done and you're ready to submit it, that's great. But I want to like make sure, but you can submit it as soon as you're done. I give you feedback and then you can redo it. So earlier is actually better. And so if you're like, well, I think this is pretty good and I think I got it, go ahead and submit it and I'll grade it and I'll give you feedback and then you can just tweak it as needed. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, Rowan and Kelsey, thank you so much for your time and for encouraging this. I would gladly do this again. Just like you did, shoot me a text or something. Hey, can you meet at this time? Tomorrow, whatever, and we'll make it happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
You too.